Shana Tova. I want to go on a bit of a journey together. We're going to start back in 1831 in Russia, a small town. A strange scene. A crowd of people gathering together at the cemetery. But they're not gathering in sadness. Men and women dressed in celebratory clothing, bringing food and singing songs, are gathering at the cemetery. A very strange scene. Even stranger, they're celebrating in the midst of a horrible cholera epidemic. Even more strange, amidst the crowd, suddenly a chuppah appears. But it's not the regular white chuppah that you and I know, a tallis on a canopy. Rather, the chuppah is black. From the crowd, two young orphans emerge, poor, destitute, on the margins of society. They step forward, a boy and a girl. And this young couple are married in the cemetery. What is this strange ritual? Its origins shrouded in mystery. It's called the Rosh Hashana, the Black Wedding. It doesn't appear in traditional Jewish sources like the Talmud, certainly not the Torah. Modern scholars have suggested that the initial idea of the Black Wedding was a form of protective magic, perhaps Kabbalistic, the idea that the wedding would appeal to the dead, who would then intercede on the living's behalf. Or perhaps they thought the sight of the poor young strangers marrying in a desolate location would induce God to have pity on the couple and help stop the spread of the disease. Early rabbis were very against this practice. They condemned it as superstitious, even dangerous. And it wasn't effective in stopping the plague. In spite of many black weddings that were conducted, cholera, unfortunately, came back again and again. But the custom persisted. Through the 1800s, the 1900s, even this past March in Bnei Brak, a black wedding in a cemetery of two orphans was conducted. And another strange thing happened, which is that though initially rabbis were so against this practice, over time they began to support it. Why? To answer this question, we need to understand a universal human experience that I think gets at the very core of Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is kind of a scary day. It's Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment. It's reflected in our liturgy. For example, we normally recite Hallel, joyful, celebratory psalms of praise on Rosh Chodesh, the first day of a new month, and on Yom Tov. Rosh Hashanah is both Yom Tov and the first day of the month of Tishrei, yet we don't recite Hallel. I actually think cultural Judaism gets it wrong. Cultural Judaism often assumes that Rosh Hashanah is the sweet, fun day, Shana Tova u'metuka, honey, nice things, and Yom Kippur is the sad and somber day. But in fact, it's the opposite. Yom Kippur is a day of love and joy and intimacy and forgiveness, beautiful spiritual joy. Rosh Hashanah is the day of fear, of judgment, of anxiety. Why is Rosh Hashanah so scary? I think there's a simple answer. Because for most of human history and for most of Jewish history, the future was scary. According to the Talmud, we don't say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah because it would be inappropriate for us to sing and rejoice when the books of life and death are open and our fates lie in the balance. Rosh Hashanah is a moment of great vulnerability, says the Talmud. Now, this idea of a new year being a time of uncertainty and fear, I think was a bit foreign, perhaps, to our people over the last 50 or so years. Those of us who've had the zchut, the merit of living in this period of Jewish history, from 1948 on, have had the zchut of collectively, as a nation, looking ahead with joy and optimism and hope to the coming year. Yes, of course, individually, many of us have had looked forward to difficult years and struggles, but communally, as a people, since 1948, the future has generally felt full of promise. The future has generally felt bright. I continue to be filled with hope about the future of our people, of our world. But I also know that this year there's much more collective uncertainty and fear than in years past. This experience, while an aberration maybe from the last 50 years, I think reflects the collective experience of the Jewish people over 2,000 years. A new year, what would it bring? Another pogrom? Another war? Exile? Plague? So many terrible things could happen in an upcoming year. And we as Jews, we're terribly anxious to make them stop. It's reflected in our liturgy. Unatana Tokef is a prime example of the fear and uncertainty of a new year. It's a prayer that is a difficult prayer, a prayer I struggle with every year, and this year even more so. It's a prayer where we say, who by fire? Who by water? Who by upheaval? Who by plague? Who will be impoverished? Who will be exalted? And then the theme of our frailness and our vulnerability continues, hammered home in the next paragraph. We humans are compared to a tzitz novel, a tzel over, cha'anan kala, ruach no shavet, avak poreach uchalom ya'uf. We are like a withering grass, a fading flower, a passing shade, a dissipating cloud, flying dust, a fleeting dream. How do we respond spiritually to that level of uncertainty? How do we respond to those feelings of frailty and fear about the future? One very human response is magic. Magic. We seek out rituals, protections, charms that will give us control over that which we cannot control. In 1909, there was a cholera outbreak in Yerushalayim, and a black wedding was held on Mount Olive, Har HaZeitim. A certain newspaper editor named Eliezer Ben Yehuda, founder of modern Hebrew, wrote, "In any case of disease or plague in the world, the common people try to fight it with supernatural or irrational measures, wizardry, oaths, folk remedies. And this is true not just for the Jewish people, it is common to all people all over the world." So true words that he wrote. Magic is a way to try to gain control over that which we cannot control. Try to feel comfortable and safe amongst things that we fear. And there's old school magic, magical rituals and incantations, which are coming back in vogue now. I've heard that astrology has seen a huge resurgence in the past couple months. And there's also modern day magic, magical thinking, ritualistic behavior, wiping down every surface, every item in the grocery bag, the bottom of every shoe, washing hands 5 times, an N95 mask covered with a cloth mask. We do things to try to protect us from that which is scary and that which we cannot control. There's another side too, magical thinking, conspiratorial thinking. Why have conspiracies become so popular? They're attractive. The idea that you can understand and name and fight the powers who are creating all the turmoil and chaos in the world. It's the Jews, it's the Chinese, it's aliens, it's the CIA, it's Bill Gates. That gives people a sense of comfort in a reality, in a world that's very uncomfortable, in a world that's very scary and uncertain. I really wish that magic and magical thinking worked. I wish there was some magical way. I wish there was a Jewish secret way, secret ritual, secret incantation that was some way to prevent sickness and death and suffering. But there isn't. Judaism ultimately recognizes that magic doesn't work. The author of the Rosh Hashanah Machzor realized this. There's a famous midrash, might sound familiar. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shalom, says the following: Shlosha dvarim mevatlin gzeira kasha. There are 3 things that can annul, that can cancel a difficult decree. What's a difficult decree? a plague, loss, financial ruin. 3 things can cancel it. What are they? We all want to know. It's going to sound familiar. Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. Repentance, prayer, and charity. That probably sounds familiar to many of you. But if we think about it for a minute, does that mean that anyone who suffered this past year, does that mean anyone who caught coronavirus or died for coronavirus, God forbid, does that mean they didn't do tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah? I wish the midrash was true. I wish that if we daven hard enough or say we're sorry enough times or give enough tzedakah, we'll be protected from all harm. But I know that it won't. I know there are great people, great tzaddikim, who lost their lives this past year. I know there are many people who weren't so great that are doing just fine. The author of the Machzor knew that too. Listen to the text we recite on Rosh Hashanah. It's a little different than the midrash. U'tshuva, u'tfilah, u'tzedakah, ma'avirin et roa hagzeira. What is he saying? He changed the text of the midrash, the anonymous author. He changed it from these 3 things will cancel out the decree to ma'avirin will help us get through the difficult decree. Ma'avir comes from the word to cross, like in modern Hebrew, la'avor et hakvish, to cross the road. Avraham ha'ivri, our patriarch, Abraham the Hebrew. What is Hebrew? What does ivri mean? One who crossed over. La'avor, he crossed the river. He crossed the other side. He came from the other side, and he reached the promised land. He crossed over. Ma'avirin et roa hagzeira. When the author of the Machzor changed the midrash, he changed the words of the midrash to teach us that righteousness, prayer, good deeds, repentance don't cancel evil. They help us get through it. It's not an escape from wrong and from harm, but rather it's a way to forge ahead through the wickedness until we reach the other side. Because that's, at the end of the day, what we believe. While there are superstitious elements in Judaism, fundamentally Judaism does not believe in magic. We believe in God. We believe in the Torah. We believe in tshuva, in tefillah, in tzedakah. We believe in infusing those things into our lives to help us get through the challenges that arise before us. I often think of the quote by the great Dr. Martin Luther King. Very important quote. He says, "If a man has not discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live." If we haven't discovered something that we'll die for, we're not fit to live. Now, this doesn't mean that we all have to go out and become martyrs. It just means simply that we have to have something that we're living for beyond just trying to live to another day. We need to have a vision. We need to have values, teachings that help us get through the bad times and lay the foundation for the good that's ahead. Rosh Hashanah is an encounter with the future, an encounter which for almost all of our history meant uncertainty and doubt and fear. And initially we might hope for a magic response that will make us safe, but we learn there isn't one. But through that deep and sometimes painful learning, we come to a deeper truth, that a life of tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah is a life worth living. That a life of tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah focuses us away from magic and instead to meaning. A life of return, of prayer, and of righteousness shifts us from trying to just grasp vainly at more years to add to our life, and instead helps us add more life to our years. And this is exactly what I believe was going on with that mysterious black wedding. Why did the rabbis eventually get behind it? Why did the ritual persist? Rav Yitzchak Lipetz, a rabbi in Warsaw, 1800s, wrote a wonderful sefer called Sefer Matamim, the Book of Delicacies, where he explains different customs of the Jewish people. And he writes very powerfully, V'zehu atam she'osin chatuna im ani bachor im betula aniyah. This is the reason why we do a black wedding during plague time. This is the reason why we marry an orphan to another orphan. Why? Kedei lismoach et ha'olam, to bring joy to the world. Ki etzleinu, b'nei Yisrael, for us, the Jewish people, I efshar liyot b'simcha ki im al yedei simcha shel mitzvah. Because for the Jewish people, there's no real joy except the joy of a good deed. This is the reason we do a marriage between a poor young man and a poor young woman, to bring joy and light and justice and righteousness into the world. The black wedding had the potential to bring the community together around its highest values. Those same values we cried out in Unatana Tokef, to do tshuva by remembering and caring for those it had neglected. The tefillah of bringing the community together to offer blessing and prayers for the health of the new couple and for the world. And finally, the tzedakah. These were orphans, often homeless, disabled. They had no chance of building a life. The weddings were financed by wealthy members of the community. And after the marriage, the community pledged to support the couple in building a new home, in building a Beit Ne'eman b'Yisrael. That's what the black wedding was about. When I think back over the last few months here at Skokie Valley, and what this community has accomplished through the uncertainty and the fear that we've all gone through, I think about that. I think about tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. I'm so amazed at the way this community has done tshuva, has reflected, has learned, asked hard questions, whether on Zoom classes or in one-on-one backyard schmoozes or just in writing and reflecting. People have been asking themselves very profound questions. What is really essential in my life? What are the core values I have that I want to focus on in this difficult time? What have I learned from this crazy year? What changes do I need to make to be the best self that I can be? I've seen it over and over again in our community. And tefillah, we have valiantly maintained our connection and our commitment to prayer, whether alone, on Zoom, in person, outdoors, whether Friday night singing together as a community as we welcome Shabbat on Zoom, or ensuring there's a minyan physically present so that those who are saying Kaddish can recite it, either in person or on the computer. And tzedakah, charity, acts of righteousness. This community has supported those in need over and over again through these months, these difficult months. Whether it was delivering dozens of Pesach Seders to those who couldn't make it on their own, thousands and thousands of pounds of food delivered to the Ark, to the Niles Township Food Pantry, to the south side of Chicago in a time of great need there, supporting our first responders and our kosher restaurants with dozens and dozens of meals, and the quiet support that we've offered to members of our own community who are going through difficult times in the midst of this pandemic. It's been amazing to see the tzedakah in this community. And we've even had weddings. Not at the cemetery, but in backyards. Can you imagine? A bride and a groom planned their wedding for months. The guest list, the flowers, the makeup artists, the color themes, the band, and then a pandemic. And then the couple decides, let's do it anyway. A backyard, 4 poles, 10 guests with masks. Why would they do it? Why would they throw away their dream wedding? They did it because they believed in something more than makeup artists and flowers. They did it because they believed in each other. They did it because they believed in love. They did it because they believed in the power of a Jewish wedding, not to magically stop a plague, but instead to bring joy and light into the world. And let me tell you, these simple weddings, these backyard weddings, were so exquisitely beautiful. They reflected our deepest beliefs, not in magic, not in conspiracy, not in despair. Those weddings reflected our beliefs in the power of tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. They reflected our belief in the power of kindness, in compassion, and love. They reflected our deep belief in God. Our deep belief that those things will help us get through whatever challenges we face. They reflected the belief that tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, righteousness, reflection, prayer, can ultimately get us through any obstacle we face, individually, communally, globally. So this year, may we know that simcha. May we know the simcha shel mitzvah. May we know that joy, the joy of chatan and kala, the joy of bride and groom, the joy of prayer, the joy of reflection, the joy of justice. May we open our hearts to those joys. May we grow in them each. And together, may we celebrate weddings, each other, life, our community, in health, in protection, in safety. All of us together. Shana Tova.